Hello, everybody. I decided to do a video specifically about the issue of guilt and innocence in our current dialogue. For some reason, activists want certain people to be guilty and certain people to be innocent. And what is the factor that is most important to them when they discuss this issue? What should be the most important issue? If you haven't already, I urge you to go back and watch, first of all, my video about Kyle Rittenhouse. Specifically, why do they still think he's guilty? And I go over that a bit in that video. And another video I did that didn't get as many views, and I want you guys to go ahead and check it out, because it's actually really critical to a lot of other things regarding this racial activism issue. But it has to do with people literally thinking that Killmonger, the villain from the Black Panther film, was actually somehow a hero. That's real. And the people that were responding to it are real, including the actor himself. So, before we get into that, I want to take a look at this case that just came up. So when you're using mainstream media, just kind of try to watch the raw footage and don't draw any conclusions from the spin. In this instance, I don't think they had to spin anything. Let's watch this together.
A jury foreman speaking out about what was going through her mind moments before a high-profile murder case ended in a mistrial. 7's Nicole Insalata reports.
We just need to follow the law as they instructed us to do and not put our emotions into this.
But one of the jurors charged with deciding the fate of accused murderer Dante Wright says that's exactly what happened in the jury room. The trial ended this week with a hung jury, and the foreperson says 3 jurors were unwilling to convict Wright based on his race.
They said, I don't want to send a young black male to jail for the rest of their life or have them get the death sentence.
Wright could face either of those most severe penalties if he's convicted of killing Jill Sue. Prosecutors say Wright broke into the 59-year-old's Davie home intending to commit burglary, but when he found her inside, tied her up and stabbed her 24 times. His DNA found on a knife and inside the home. He was arrested, charged with murder, and 2 years later escaped from the courthouse during a hearing. Investigators tracked him down nearly a week later. Finally, in late November, the trial. And after 6 days of deliberation,
ladies and gentlemen, it's my understanding you have reached a verdict.
They had Wright guilty of manslaughter, or so it seemed. When it came time for the foreperson to confirm the verdict in open court, she couldn't do it.
Is this your verdict?
No. I took a deep breath. I'm staring at the judge and at the clerk, and we're locking eyes, and I'm looking at each of one of them, and they're just waiting for my verdict of either yes, I agree, or no, and I just couldn't, and that's why I said no.
She said most of the jury was ready to convict Wright of at least second-degree murder, but 3 refused because the defendant is black. They compromised on manslaughter, but she said she had a pit in her stomach and she changed her mind. Returning to the jury room, she said she was cursed out, even threatened.
You guys keep saying a young black man, I don't see race. I just see a human being. And, one particular person said to me, hey, if you were outside this courtroom, you would have gotten smacked out in the street for this.
A new jury will hear the same evidence after the new year. She hopes they will do their job.
Put the emotions aside, put the bias aside, put racial aside, just follow the law.
Nicole Insalata for Today in Florida.
Now, I want you to think for a moment specifically about what was said and what would have made those 3 jurors satisfied. We're supposed to believe that all of this activism is geared towards specifically making everybody equal, making their race no longer, a factor in the criminal justice system. But that's very clearly not what they want. They want the race of people in question to be paramount. They want it to be a reason for somebody to be exonerated or to receive a lesser charge, which is ironically exactly what they claim the justice system does for white people. This is, again, not an attempt at equality. This is an attempt at inverting the hierarchy and simply turning it in the other direction, which is not justice. Let's take some tweets from Black Lives Matter specifically to use as kind of a gauge for the overall dialogue. The little racist terrorist Kyle Rittenhouse represents the exact kind of white supremacist vigilante violence that we've seen before, with the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the murder of Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman, who was not white, and They've tried to equate these two things, but really what it amounts to is this. As I pointed out in my earlier video, they need him to be guilty because of his race. Period. They want him to be guilty because of his race, but also because of the politics and the ideology. They need anybody who goes to a quote-unquote peaceful protest and defends themselves when they choose to attack them to be guilty. That should be an act that just should not be allowed. You can't interfere with rioters. And if you do this, then you are a white supremacist, racist, and everything else. That's what they need in order for their whole worldview to work. And in contrast to this, if you happen to be black, then they need you to be innocent by virtue of your race. The facts of the case being irrelevant. Again, just as Black Lives Matter continues to support Jussie Smollett, even though that guy is obviously as guilty as a cat in a goldfish bowl. You'll also notice the interesting little point at the top that Black Lives Matter will continue work towards the abolition of police and every unjust system. I hope now that we can stop pretending that Black Lives Matter doesn't want to abolish the police, because it's all over their website. They don't even hide it. This statement was written before the end of the trial when Jussie Smollett was declared guilty. But afterwards, they said they needed to continue to support him because, after all, police lie. I was looking for that tweet, but it doesn't look like it's up anymore, but I remember reading it at the time. The other funny thing is Black Lives Matter has recently locked up their tweets so that only people that they approve of can comment on them, and that's because they've been getting eviscerated on Twitter. And strangely enough, even people of color are not really defending them much anymore. But again, like you see right here, imagining abolition right there at the top. Let's take a moment and read this statement. And then again, this was when the trial was still going on. As abolitionists, we approach situations of injustice with love and align ourselves within our community because we got us. So let's be clear. We love everybody in our community. It's not about a trial or a verdict decided in a white supremacist charade. It's about how we treat our community when corrupt systems are working to devalue our lives or their lives. In an abolitionist society, this trial would not be taking place, and our communities would not have to fight and suffer to prove our worth. Instead, we find ourselves once again being forced to put our lives and our value in the hands of judges and juries operating in a system that is not designed to oppress us, while continuing to face a corrupt and violent police department, which has proven time and again to have no respect for our lives. So they literally say right here that in an abolitionist society, this trial would not be taking place and our communities would not have to fight and suffer to prove our worth. So in the world that they want, the one that they are striving for, if a black man decided to create a race crime hoax, and to do so for the purposes of trying to manipulate society, to try to garner sympathy from himself, and honestly, to make money, that they should not be prosecuted for doing that. And I honestly feel, looking at a lot of other things that Black Lives Matter has been doing recently, they don't really think that black people should be prosecuted ever. And again, that this is them striving to have the society that existed for white people, I would say more blatantly back in, say, the 50s, where a white person might get off for doing something, but, and I'm not saying that still never happens, but the point is that they're not looking for a society that does not bring race into the criminal justice system. Again, they want to invert the hierarchy. They want black privilege. They don't want an end to privilege. They want black privilege. And just as with Jacob Blake, who raped a woman and had been abusing her for years and was breaking a restraining order that she had against him when the cops were trying to arrest him, anybody who is shot by the police who happens to be black should always be treated as though they are the martyr and an absolute innocent person, no matter what the actual facts of the case say, and their victims are invisible, even if they happen to be black. I go over this in my video, Woke Rape Culture, because for some reason, rapes can disappear in the ideology of the current, far left, if they're not politically expedient. And they have a hierarchy of what causes are more important than others, and that includes when it comes to violence against women not being as important as cops shooting people. And as you can see, as per typical, anybody shot by cops is always characterized as if they were just a beautiful, gentle soul who was struck down in the prime of their life, no matter what it is that they were doing when they got shot by cops. And I want to be clear, Kim Potter screwed up big time, and she was at least guilty of some form of manslaughter. But that's not my point. So let's take a look at this. As the jury deliberates in the Kim Potter trial, let's lift the name of Dante Wright. Justice for him would mean that he was still here to raise his child, love family, and step fully into his life's purpose. Justice in his name means that the cop who killed him is held accountable. In another tweet on the topic, Kim Potter was found guilty. May the spirit of justice in the name of Dante Wright lead us into the new year. And as this person puts below that, this is, again, one of the reasons why Black Lives Matter has now disabled tweets from anybody that they don't approve. Problem with BLM is that they bear no responsibility for the actions of their own people, and they make it seem like it's one-sided when it's very evidently not. And that's a very good point. But again, they're not striving for equality. They're not striving for justice. They're striving for an inversion of the hierarchy. They are a black supremacist movement, and by nature, therefore, racist. So I, once again, despise using mainstream media for anything, but just watch this video real quick of this kid, filming himself in the bathroom, literally right before he commits the crime that was the reason that he had a warrant out for his arrest. I think that makes the point. This kid was not normal. He was not mentally healthy. And he certainly wasn't just some kid who would be living his life and raising his child and recognizing his potential. But that's not how they portray him. How do they portray him? Well, let's take a look. Dante Wright, doting dad, ball player slain by police. And, once again, very carefully selected images of this guy, with his big smile on his face, posing with his baby. This is the image that is released to everybody else. This is the image of Dante Wright, the innocent, angelic boy struck down in his prime. And again, nobody ever talks about his crime, and nobody ever talks about any of his victims. There are actually lawsuits against him because apparently he shot a kid in the head, and as a consequence, the kid is now permanently disabled. And I don't have as much evidence about that, but I did stumble on the victim specifically being interviewed once again by Fox News. So I'm not going to read the Fox News spin, but just watch the raw footage of this girl talking about what happened to her. But before we do that, once again, compare in your mind this image that is commonly being distributed to everybody as this is Dante Wright, the doting father, cared deeply for his child. Or you can take a look at this image over here, which is Dante Wright filming himself with a gun right before he goes out to commit an armed robbery against a girl who was nice enough to let him stay in her house the night before, and he got up in the morning and does what we're getting ready to watch her describe. And as you watch this, I want you to once again consider the fact that the same people who were tweeting justice for Dante Wright, the human piece of shit, were also the kind of people who would want anyone canceled even for tweeting or suggesting that violence against women is okay. But once again, as I pointed out in Woke Rape Culture, my video about this topic, violence against women is for some reason subordinate against anybody being shot by police, even if they're guilty as fuck.
Everybody feels so horrible for this man, but no one takes the time to see how horrible of a person he was. There's something about him where it's you look into his eyes and it's so evil. And so he started to come at me. And then that's when he put his hands around my neck. And he started to choke me, and I couldn't breathe. And that's when like he started ripping on my clothes. And he tried to like rip, which he did. He like ripped my shirt apart, and he was trying to like rip my bra off because he knew I put the money in my bra. I'm stuck with re-traumatizing myself every time I have to speak upon this subject or see it on the news or hear from my grandma that an old friend is posting in honor of Dante because of the whole Black Lives Matter thing. And I had to park my car at the police station, and I had to stay with my mom. Like, I did not feel safe at my apartment because I felt like someone was gonna kill me while I was sleeping. And when I was there, I had to keep a knife on me. And so it's like, it's just, I hate having to fear that, like, I don't know if anybody's, like, waiting for me to, like, be alone to hurt me because of what happened to him. Like, there's so many times where because of the actions people took upon me, it made me feel so weak to the point where, like, I wanted to take my own life, or, like, I wanted to coat myself in so much drugs and alcohol to where, like, I didn't have to, like, really acknowledge the pain, like, I was feeling. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
And what's even more ironic about this is his victim happened to be a Black Lives Matter protester.
Like, I'm all for Black Lives Matter. I was in the march. I was doing all those things. I was on the bridge whenever everything happened for George Floyd. It's ironic that he died the way he could have killed me. Like having a gun pointed towards him. Whether that was accidental or not accidental, which I think it was an accident, it made me start to think, like, how many more people could he have almost killed if he was still here?
So, what would justice for Dante Wright look like? Well, Dante Wright should have been in prison, for sure. That's justice for Dante Wright. If they hadn't released him on bond, he'd still be alive. That would have been justice for Dante Wright. My question is, what about justice for his victim? What about justice for Jacob Blake's victim? What about justice for all of the victims of, say, Joseph Rosenbaum? For some reason, all of those people are invisible when we discuss this. Because again, there's a hierarchy of essentially things that they think are more important. And that hierarchy includes abolishing police, because as they said earlier, then trials like these wouldn't even be taking place, and people of color would be free to commit crime, in the name of justice for hundreds of years oppression met out by people who are no longer alive against people who are no longer alive. That's what they want. And I'm sorry, but that's not justice. It's certainly not equality. And these are the people that they're upholding as their martyrs. These are the people that they're fighting for. And when you go back and watch my Killmonger video, you'll understand exactly how sick this is getting. Because they literally thought that a guy who was intent on trying to commit genocide against all of the white people on Earth, even if it meant a world war, was somehow their hero. Killmonger was the hero of Black Panther to these people. Thanks for listening. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, ring the bell, go to my website, and join me on my various social media platforms. If you could, please support me on Patreon or PayPal. It's all appreciated at this point. I'm never going to be able to be monetized. If you like content like this and you want to continue to see it, you're going to have to support it outside of YouTube. I'm more or less just kind of working on borrowed time before they just take me off of the platform altogether. I'm still going to keep doing this work, but if you want to see it, please go to my website, subscribe to me on Odyssey, BitChute, all of my other places. We need to just kind of make the signal as redundant as possible. Because I'm going to continue to call this stuff out, but this is a message that people don't want heard. As far as the financial support, again, I'm not looking to make a fortune here. I'm just looking to be whole from where I was working in my crappy restaurant job. And that'll be enough for me. I actually don't want to make much more than that. And the reason why is because, as I've said before, if your money starts to become such a big factor in your journalism, it will affect the integrity of your journalism. I'm not as interested in that. Please share this stuff because, as you've seen, the algorithm does not like me. And I think that this information isn't just important for me, it's important for the world. We need to keep calling this kind of negative stuff out. And I want to once again point out, I absolutely believe, and the more I study this stuff, whoever it is that's at the core of all of this is diabolically racist. Ironically, they are diabolically racist against black people. This whole situation feels like it's literally socially engineered specifically to destroy people of color. And I'm going to get into that more as I do more videos. I'm still working on my long-form video specifically about why all of this activism is literally creating more racism, more sexism, more bigotry. And I think that's by design. It's not just incompetence. Somebody wants this to happen. They want these divisions to happen. So don't come away from this looking down on black people. We need to figure out specifically who it is that's creating this and call them out, including grifters like Black Lives Matter who are clearly doing all of this for profit. Thanks again.